There are battles at sea where nobody truly wins, only men trapped inside steel coffins, drifting between darkness, pressure, and the slow approach of death. And if you stay until the end of this story, you will understand why the most powerful weapon in war is not firepower, but the ability to stay calm while everything around you is collapsing. It is the night of August 27th, 1942. The Caribbean Sea is pitch black, silent except for the sound of waves cutting against steel hulls. An Allied convoy moves carefully through the darkness, carrying oil, ammunition, and supplies that keep the entire war machine alive across the Atlantic. Hidden among the shadows is a predator, German submarine U-94, more than 200 feet of steel and machinery, gliding silently across the surface of the water. Inside the cramped hull, the air is thick with diesel fumes, sweat, and tension. Every man aboard knows they are deep inside enemy waters. Captain Otto Eitz stands inside the conning tower, staring through the darkness at a Canadian escort ship ahead of the convoy. The target is close, too close. One perfect torpedo strike could rip the submarine transforms from hunter to hunted in a heartbeat. Crewmen scramble down the ladders as the heavy hatch slams shut above them. Ballast tanks begin flooding with seawater. The bow tilts downward. Metal groans under pressure as U-94 starts slipping beneath the surface. 10 meters. 20 meters. But the descent is too slow. Above them, the Catalina has already locked onto their position. 4 massive depth charges tumble from the aircraft and disappear into the black ocean. A few seconds later, the sea erupts. The explosions hammer the submarine from every direction. Inside the hull, lights flicker violently. Pipes shake loose. Men are thrown against steel walls as shockwaves slam through the compartments like giant invisible fists. The helmsman fights desperately with the controls, trying to force the submarine deeper. Then, the boat suddenly stops descending. "She won't go deeper, Captain!" One of the explosions has ripped away the forward hydroplanes. Without them, U-94 cannot dive properly anymore. The submarine is wounded, trapped between the surface above and destruction below.
The nearest ship to the flare is a Canadian corvette named HMCS Oakville. Small, fast, and built for one purpose only: hunting submarines. The moment the signal arrives, alarms explode across the deck. "Enemy submarine spotted! Battle stations!" Men rush through narrow passageways as boots hammer against wet steel. Sailors grab helmets, ammunition, and weapons while the ship cuts hard through the Caribbean waves. Somewhere below deck, engines roar louder as Oakville pushes toward maximum speed. Among the chaos, Sub-Lieutenant Hal Lawrence sprints across the deck wearing almost nothing except tropical shorts. There was no time to dress properly, no time to think. War does not wait for uniforms. Despite the madness around him, Lawrence slides into position beside the sonar equipment. Headphones clamp over his ears as he leans forward, focusing entirely on the sounds beneath the ocean. "Get me their position." "Aye, sir." The sonar pulse travels outward through the water. A sharp metallic ping echoes into the darkness below. Seconds later, it comes back. "Contact. Target dead ahead." Deep underwater, the German crew hears it too. Inside U-94, every sonar ping sounds like handfuls of gravel thrown against the hull. Each one means the same thing. They know exactly where we are. The submarine turns sharply starboard as Otto Eitz attempts evasive maneuvers. Men cling to pipes and railings while the damaged boat groans under pressure. "Hard right!" But the Canadians stay locked onto them. Lawrence keeps his hands steady on the equipment, listening carefully through static and echoes. Every small sound matters now. A mistake of only a few degrees could let the submarine disappear into the ocean forever. Then suddenly, the sonar signal vanishes. Lawrence slowly lifts his head. We're directly over them. On the bridge above, Captain Clarence King gives the order instantly. "Depth charges away!" At the stern of Oakville, sailors move with brutal efficiency. Heavy metal canisters are rolled into position. Safety pins are ripped free one after another. Then the charges tumble into the sea behind the ship. For a moment, there is silence. Then the ocean detonates. Towering columns of water explode upward behind Oakville as the chain of blasts tears through the Caribbean Sea. The shockwaves slam into U-94 with terrifying force. Inside the submarine, lights burst. Rivets snap loose. Water sprays through damaged seams as men struggle to stay on their feet. "Damage report! We're flooding!" The words hit harder than the explosions. Otto Eitz already understands the truth. Staying underwater means certain death. The submarine is too damaged to escape another attack. Surfacing is almost suicide. But at least suicide gives them a chance to fight back. For a few long
compressed air blasts through the ballast tanks as U-94 begins rising toward the surface. The damaged submarine trembles violently during the ascent, like a dying animal forcing itself up for one final breath. Inside the narrow compartments, German sailors gather beneath the hatches with pale faces and loaded weapons. Some whisper prayers under their breath. Others stare silently into space, trying not to imagine what is waiting above them. Nobody says the obvious truth. The moment those hatches open, the entire ocean will become a battlefield. Above the surface, the crew of HMCS Oakville scans the dark waves through binoculars. Searchlights sweep across the water. Every sailor aboard knows the submarine has only two choices now: sink below and drown, or rise up and fight. On top of U-94, sailors burst from the hatches just in time to see the terrifying sight racing toward them. A warship moving at full speed, growing larger every second. "Oh God, they're gonna ram us! Brace for impact!" Men on both vessels grab onto railings and steel supports as the distance disappears. Then, steel collides with steel. Oakville slams into the submarine with a deafening crash. The impact throws sailors sideways across the deck. Inside the U-boat, men smash against pipes and machinery while alarms scream through the compartments. But it is not a clean hit. The corvette strikes at an angle, scraping violently across the submarine's hull before sliding away. Sparks explode into the darkness. Metal bends and tears. Both ships stagger apart through the heavy waves. "Bring us alongside!" Captain King refuses to let the submarine escape. Oakville swings hard around in a wide turn, leaning dangerously as sailors rush across the deck toward their battle stations. Machine guns are loaded. Rifles snap into firing position. "Open fire!" The Canadian 4-inch gun erupts first. A massive flash lights up the night as the shell smashes directly into the conning tower of U-94. Steel fragments burst outward. Smoke and debris rain across the submarine's deck. Captain Otto Eitz knows they must respond immediately or die where they stand. "Man the deck gun!" Two German sailors climb out onto the exposed deck and sprint low toward the 88mm cannon mounted near the bow. Bullets instantly rip across the steel around them. "Suppress that gun!" Canadian machine guns hammer the deck with streams of tracers. Sparks explode off the gun shield as the Germans dive for cover. The cannon twists under the impacts, damaged before it can even fire a single shot. Another hatch bursts open behind the conning tower. A German crewman lunges toward the anti-aircraft gun. He barely touches the weapon before bullets shred the mount apart. Metal snaps violently. The gun jerks sideways and collapses into useless wreckage. Then, another shell from Oakville crashes into the conning.
The 4-inch gun crew aboard Oakville works furiously to reload. Smoke drifts across the deck while spent shell casings roll through seawater around their boots. Every man moves with the speed of pure adrenaline. Then suddenly, the gun locks up. "Misfire!" The words hit the bridge like a punch to the throat. Captain Clarence King clenches his jaw. The submarine is still alive, still floating, and every second they hesitate gives the Germans another chance to escape into the darkness. There is only one option left. "Ram them again!" Oakville turns.
Hard to starboard. Full speed.
The engines strain desperately as U-94 tries to break away into the darkness. Black smoke pours from the exhaust while the submarine limps across the waves like a wounded animal. But Oakville is faster. Far faster. On the Canadian bridge, Captain King watches the fleeing submarine carefully. His expression hardens.
Prepare to ram.
This time, there will be no mistake. Oakville accelerates directly toward the U-boat's bow. The entire corvette shakes from the power of its engines as sailors grip the rails tightly, bracing themselves for impact. The distance vanishes in seconds. Then the Canadian warship smashes directly into the front of U-94. The collision is catastrophic. The submarine lurches violently as metal tears apart beneath the waterline. Inside the hull, for a brief moment, the battle pauses. The gunfire fades. The engines slow. Even the waves seem quieter now, as if the ocean itself is watching to see what happens next. Captain Clarence King stares at the crippled submarine through the darkness. A fully captured German U-boat would be an intelligence prize beyond imagination. Codebooks, navigation systems, patrol routes, technology. Entire naval campaigns could change because of what sits floating only yards away. But there is almost no time. The Germans have already opened the flooding valves. Water is rushing into the submarine every second. Someone has to board the U-boat, get inside and shut the valves before the sea claims everything. King turns immediately. Lawrence, prepare a boarding party. Aye, aye, sir. Hal Lawrence wastes no time. He sprints toward the equipment locker with 12 men following close behind. There are no heroic speeches, no dramatic preparation, only urgency. The sailors arm themselves quickly with .45 caliber revolvers, flashlights, and grenades. Most of them are barefoot. Nearly all are still wearing nothing except shorts soaked from seawater and sweat. They look less like elite naval commandos and more like exhausted survivors thrown into madness by accident. Yet within minutes, they are standing at the bow of Oakville, staring down at...
An enormous explosion erupts only a few feet away from the boarding team. The shockwave punches through Lawrence like a physical wall. His vision disappears instantly as the blast hurls him backward across the deck. Then, darkness. For several seconds, the battle vanishes completely. No sound. No pain. Nothing. Far away, a voice slowly cuts through the void. Lawrence! Wake up! Hal Lawrence opens his eyes weakly. His ears are ringing violently. The world around him feels blurred and distant. Petty Officer Art Powell is kneeling beside him, slapping his face hard enough to keep him conscious. You still with us? Lawrence blinks several times, forcing himself upright. Every muscle in his body screams in pain, but there is no time to recover. The submarine is still sinking. He steadies himself against the railing and looks back toward U-94 floating beside them in the darkness. All right, boys, he says, quietly. Let's finish this. Without hesitation, Lawrence climbs onto the rail and jumps. For one brief second, he hangs suspended above the black ocean between two warships. Then he crashes down onto the deck of the German submarine, 8 feet below. The landing hits harder than expected. Lawrence feels something snap instantly around his waist. He looks down. The elastic in his shorts has completely broken. For a moment, even in the middle of chaos, his brain refuses to process the absurdity of what just happened. Then the soaked shorts slide straight to his ankles. Art Powell lands beside him a second later and stares in disbelief.
Behind the boarding party, disaster is beginning to spread aboard Oakville as well. The repeated ramming attacks have damaged the corvette badly. Deep below the waterline, twisted hull plates are allowing seawater to pour into the boiler room. Engineers fight desperately to contain the flooding, while steam hisses through the cramped compartments. "Cut the engines!" The order echoes through the ship. Almost immediately, Oakville begins drifting away in the rough sea. The gap between the corvette and the submarine widens faster with every wave. The rest of the boarding team freezes at the rail. The jump is impossible now. Too far. Too dangerous. That leaves only 2 men stranded aboard the German submarine. Hal Lawrence and Art Powell. Alone. The 2 Canadians exchange a quick look before turning toward the conning tower. Beneath their bare feet, the steel deck rocks violently with the ocean swells. Around them, seawater rushes across the submarine's surface, while smoke drifts through the night air. Somewhere inside the hole below, water is still flooding in. Every second matters. Lawrence tightens his grip on his revolver as they move forward carefully through the darkness. The submarine feels strangely abandoned now. Gunfire has stopped completely. The battle that exploded with so much violence only minutes earlier has collapsed into eerie silence. Finally, they reach the ladder leading up toward the bridge. And then, clang! A hatch suddenly bursts open only a few feet away. Lawrence and Powell instantly raise their weapons. "Hands up! Come out slowly!"
For a moment, nobody moves. Then 2 German officers climb out of the hatch into the night air. Captain Otto Eitz and his executive officer. Both men stare directly at the 2 nearly naked Canadians standing on the submarine with pistols pointed at them. Water drips from the steel around them, while the waves slam against the hull below. For several strange seconds, nobody speaks. The German captain locks eyes with Lawrence. Then slowly, his expression changes. Confusion. Then horror. His eyes drift downward, then back upward again. Standing before him is an armed enemy officer covered in oil, barefoot, exhausted, and no longer wearing any shorts. The moment is so surreal that even in the middle of war, neither side fully understands what they are looking at. The executive officer leans slightly toward Eitz. "What do you think they plan to do with us?" The captain never takes his eyes off Lawrence. "I don't want to find out." Without another word, both German officers suddenly leap off the side of the submarine into the black ocean below. Lawrence and Powell rush toward the railing, just in time to see them disappearing into the darkness between the waves. They won't get far in this sea. Forget them. We need the bridge. The 2 Canadians climb upward onto the conning tower. From there, Lawrence shouts down into the submarine's interior. "Come out! You surrender and nobody gets hurt!" At first, there was only silence. Then movement. One by one, exhausted German sailors begin climbing toward the surface. Faces pale, hands raised. Some are injured. Others can barely stand after the bombardment. They know the situation is hopeless. Stay below and drown, or surrender. Art Powell quickly takes control of the prisoners, forcing them flat against the deck while Lawrence moves toward the open hatch leading inside the submarine. Below him waits darkness.
Hal Lawrence grips the edge of the hatch and lowers himself carefully into the submarine. Instantly, the sounds of the ocean disappear behind him. The inside of U-94 is pitch black, except for a few dying emergency lights flickering deep within the control room. Water sloshes around the metal floor below as the submarine groans under the pressure of the sea pressing against its damaged hull. The air smells of diesel fuel, salt water, and burnt machinery. Every instinct in Lawrence's body tells him to turn around and get out. Instead, he keeps climbing downward. Hand over hand, bootless feet slipping against wet metal rungs, he descends deeper into the dying submarine alone. Above him, Art Powell continues shouting orders to the surrendered German sailors on deck, but the voices already sound distant now. The deeper Lawrence goes, the quieter everything becomes. Almost unnaturally quiet. Finally, he reaches the control room,
For years, Lawrence had studied captured German manuals and submarine diagrams. He memorized layouts, valve systems, emergency procedures. Back then, it probably felt theoretical.
Lawrence freezes instantly. The realization hits him like ice water. The submarine is dying faster than expected. Above him, Powell's voice echoes faintly down the hatch. "Sir, she's going under!" Lawrence looks around the flooded control room one last time. Water continues rising around his legs. The emergency lights flicker weaker now, casting shadows across the steel walls like a tomb sealing itself shut. For a brief moment, he considers continuing the search. One more minute. One more attempt. Maybe the valves are still somewhere nearby. Then another deep metallic groan rolls through the hull. The ocean is already crushing its way inside. The Germans won. Not with guns, not with torpedoes, but with time. Lawrence finally exhales and makes the hardest decision of the night. "Everyone, abandon ship!" He turns immediately and begins climbing back toward the ladder as freezing seawater swirls around him faster now. The submarine.
The ocean closes above U-94 as if the submarine had never existed at all. One moment, there is steel, machinery, men, and violence. The next, only black water remains. Hal Lawrence floats in the rough sea beside Art Powell and the exhausted German prisoners. Around them, pieces of debris drift silently across the waves, while HMCS Oakville struggles nearby with its own damage. For several long moments, nobody speaks. The adrenaline is finally fading now, and exhaustion is...
Captain Otto Eides is eventually recovered from the water, along with the surviving members of his crew. Cold, exhausted, and defeated, the German commander watches silently as the ocean swallows the last traces of his submarine. The war for him is effectively over. He will spend the remainder of the conflict inside prisoner of war camps in the United States, far away from the sea that once defined his entire life. Back aboard Oakville, the Canadians slowly realize how absurd the entire operation must have looked from the outside. Two barefoot sailors in tropical shorts boarding a German submarine in the middle of the night. One of them accidentally losing his clothing during the assault. A gun crew nearly knocking out their own boarding team moments before the mission began. It sounds less like military history and more like something invented for cinema. But that is the strange reality of war. The most unbelievable stories are often the true ones. Hal Lawrence and Art Powell would later receive medals for their extraordinary bravery during the boarding attempt. Newspapers turned the event into legend. Naval historians studied it for decades afterward. Yet what makes the story unforgettable is not simply the courage. It is the chaos.
What happened to U-94 was not just another isolated naval battle. It was part of a much larger nightmare unfolding across the Atlantic during the Second World War. By 1942, German U-boats had become one of the deadliest weapons on Earth. They hunted in packs across the ocean, targeting merchant convoys carrying fuel, food, ammunition, and supplies to Britain. Entire ships vanished beneath the waves within minutes. Thousands of sailors disappeared into freezing black water without warning. The Atlantic became a graveyard stretching across half the planet. And for a long time, the submarines were winning. The terrifying part was not only the destruction itself, it was the psychological pressure. Merchant crews knew they could be attacked at any moment. Many never even saw the submarine that killed them. One second, the sea looked calm. The next, an explosion ripped through steel and fire swallowed the deck. That constant, invisible threat changed everything. It forced the Allies to evolve. Convoys became larger.
Men like Hal Lawrence and Art Powell. None of them knew their actions would become history.
In those moments, they were simply trying to survive another night. That is what makes the story feel so human, even
Convoy
decades
escorts.
later. You can almost hear the metal groaning.
The nearest ship is the Canadian corvette HMCS Oakville, under the command of Captain Clarence. Over on Oakville, the crew scan the sea with their binoculars. Then they see it. The U-boat erupts from the depths and settles in full view of the Canadians. The ramming attacks have torn open some of the ship's hull plates. Down below, water rushes into the boiler room. It could be catastrophic.
Cut the engines.
Shut.
Klar. Tanks fluten.
The helmsman throws the controls forward, and the submarine's tanks fill with water.
Surrender and death.
Let's get them all
And
out.
perhaps the strangest part of all is how
Lawrence shouts down to the Germans.
I promise I won't shoot. Come up and you'll be all right.
The human brain
Oakville smashes directly into the bow of the U-boat. It's a fatal hit. The submarine's motors and protecting a convoy of Allied merchant ships and oil tankers. The U-boat's running on the surface, and Captain Otto Itis is ready to strike a large Canadian corvette when he hit a gap, sending bullets snapping across Oakville's deck. The Canadians fire back with their own weapons. Some even hurl whatever objects they can find, said Germans might have smashed the handles off before he arrived. Suddenly, there's an enormous spud that rocks the entire hull. The compartment's collapsing under pressure. Away as quickly as possible. Lawrence and Powell dash over as the two Germans disappear off into the darkness. And if you want to fight in some of the battles that we've covered, you can with our... Down below, the crew of U-94 hear every ping as it bounces off the hull of their boat. To them, it sounds like someone's flinging handfuls of gravel at the metal shell of the submarine. The German sail closes in on its dark form. Down on the German vessel, sailors on the bridge hold on tight to the railings as they prepare. The two men clamber out and head towards the bow of the submarine and climb up the ladder. Staying low, they get into the deck and dash towards the 88mm deck gun, into the sea. Oakville clears the scene. Then, the ocean erupts with a chain of mighty explosions. The helmsman swings the ship around in a wide turn, and Oakville heels over with the strain and brings her broadside in line with U-94. Horsemen's. The PBY drops a flare on the submarine's last known position. Then it turns and flashes a Morse code signal to the impact. Oakville slams into U-94's hull, but it's only a glancing blow. Inside the U-boat, the crew are rocked as they get thrown sergeant, sending towering columns of water, rising high behind the corvette. U-94 shudders under the concussions. There's a sound of rivets popping and descends into the pitch-black void. Steadying himself, he recognizes the submarine's control room from the captured manuals he's studied over the years, with a flooded interior towards the ladder. He climbs the slick metal rungs. He realizes the Germans got the better of him and admits defeat.
Get everyone off now.
Around again for another attack. Captain Itis knows that he's running out of options. His only chance is to make a break for it. Bows up in front of the Canadians.
Radar and sonar
At the hull.
approved.
The German captain locks eyes with the Canadian. Then he looks down, then up again.
The hunters.
His equal part pressure throws Lawrence to the floor, and he blacks out before he hits the deck.
Lawrence! Wake up, man!
Lawrence strains his eye revolver, hand grenades, and flashlights. Like Lawrence, they're all barefoot and wearing only their shorts. They dash down to the deck and gather at the bow, right next to the 4-inch gun. Though Itis was taken prisoner with his crew and spent the rest of the war in the US as a POW. Edges upwards, the German sailors ready themselves on the ladders, waiting to jump out of the hatches and man the guns. They're only slightly better on the surface, but at least they might live. Reluctantly, he gives the order.
Auftauchen. Wir kämpfen an der Oberfläche.
Water blasts out from U-94's tanks, and the boat surge. They peer over the rail as Oakville inches closer and closer to the stricken U-boat.
Prepare to jump!
But then, there's a catastrophic
Voraus.
Sailors at the stern heave the heavy canisters into position on the racks. Safety pins are yanked free, and one by one the heavy canisters rumble down over the racks, and they tumble. The bow smashes through the churning water as the helmsman fights the waves and lines up his target.
Hold us steady.
King watches the submarine growing larger and larger as Oakville. Lawrence, Powell, and their German prisoners were rescued from the water shortly afterwards. The 2 Canadians received medals for their bravery, while Captain Otto. The charges